Welcome back to another episode of Business Highlights. My name is Pedro. I am the managing editor of the Boca Raton Tribune. And today I am honored to have with me on the show Al Zucaro. Al, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. How are you?
Doing good as we can be, quarantine and trying to stay busy and work and create new content. So, this is one of the new things we're doing, which is very exciting. And I'm very glad that you were able to come in with us.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. One thing that the virus is causing me to become is more electronically savvy. So, using this as an opportunity to broadcast to the world I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, a lot of people nowadays are moving a lot. Obviously, a lot of people are going back into creating videos and things like that. So it's really been a renaissance of videos and all this other stuff for sure.
No, I agree.
So tell me a little bit about yourself and how long you've been in Boca and things like that.
Well, I've been in Boca Raton for the last dozen years, but I've been in Palm Beach County now for getting close to 40 years. I'm originally from New York. I was born and raised in the Bronx, lived in Manhattan during the 1970s, came here, went to law school at Nova University in 1982 to 1986, hung up a shingle in 1987 in the city of West Palm Beach, and have practiced immigration law primarily for the last 30 some odd years of my life. I moved to Boca Raton back in after I married my wife Yvonne, and that's where I live now, and I'm very happy down here in Boca.
Awesome. So how did you become an immigration lawyer? How did that come about? Is that something you've always wanted to do?
If I had a lot of time, I would tell you the various history of my life prior to being a lawyer. But because we have some limited resources, I'll start from the proposition that back in the 1970s, late 1970s, I was involved with the publishing of a magazine about nightclubs and discotheques.
Oh, okay.
And when that came to an end, it was sort of a change of life period of time. And I was introduced to some folks in New York, and one of those people, a woman by the name of Lucy Ann Goldberg, challenged me one day about future initiatives. So the next day. I enrolled in Fordham University, and I graduated Fordham University 2.5 years later. And then I decided to go to law school, but I decided to go to law school in Florida because I had enough. I had enough of New York. It was time to move.
It was too cold up there.
Right. So I came here. I enrolled in Nova University. I got my law degree in 1986. But the last year of law school, I spent most of my time in a program where I was an accredited representative for the Haitian Refugee Center in Miami,
Wow.
representing Haitian nationals in their plight for political asylum.
Oh, wow.
That put me out in the marketplace with, full-blown barred attorneys who were doing the same thing. And I began to realize that I knew as much as they did on some subjects. So I was 36 years old. I had graduated law school. I was now swearing into the bar. And I decided that the only person that was going to give me a job was me. So I hung out the shingle and I started practicing immigration law based upon political asylum. And if you remember back in well, you won't remember, you're too young, but back in the mid 1980s, there was a thing called the Immigration Reform and Control Act under Ronald Reagan.
Mm-hmm.
And I became the specialist in the city of West Palm Beach with regards to servicing the underprivileged or the undocumented aliens at the time.
Right.
And I became I really focused in on the overlap between immigration law and criminal law. And that propelled me into what became a 35-year practice of law.
Oh, wow. So you went to law school not like right after you finished college. It was a couple of years afterwards, right?
No, I went to law school immediately after I
Oh, you
finished
did?
college,
Okay.
but I didn't go to college for 10 years between high school and college.
Okay. All right. Got it. Yeah. Because you said you get like you graduate around like 30 something. That's usually not like what they do, right? Like that's why you decided to open up your own.
This is like the fourth or fifth career of my life.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Okay, if I take you all the way back, at one point in time, I was a computer operations specialist back in the early 1970s when what we now call Windows
Hmm.
was just being born under the multi MVP and MFP operating systems, disk operating systems, where computers took a whole room instead of being able to be carried around in your pocket, basically.
Right.
So I started there, and then I got into the nightclub restaurant business. I owned ski lodges over a period of time. I mean, I have a
Oh,
very varied life. My basically my the magazine I published was called Discoteching Magazine, and the underlying theme of it was the International Fun Magazine. So over the course of my life, I've done everything because it was fun. If it wasn't fun, I didn't do it.
right. And you're an immigration lawyer, but you're also a business consultant. So tell me a little bit about that. Like, what do you like? How does that part of the business? Like, what's
Well,
that part of the business?
thank you for that. This phase of my life, I'm not actively. I'm not your typical lawyer seeking the next immigration client.
Hmm.
My the last a decade, the last actually more than a decade, the last almost 20 years of my life, I have been very involved in the development of international business.
Oh,
I am very involved and a participant in an organization called the World Trade Center Associations, which has connections, which has license holders in 90 some odd countries, about 325 license holders. So
hmm.
I have a very deep reach around the world, but primarily I focus on Western Hemisphere. And
Okay.
there are 45 or so World Trade Center associations in the United States and Canada. And there are another 40 to 45 in Latin and South America. So I have begun to focus this phase of my life on being a consultant for companies that want to enter the US marketplace and using my platform here in Palm Beach County to assist them in identifying how to do that and where to structure and what the rules are. But also for companies in the United States that are interested in relocating or doing business in Latin and South America.
Mm,
So the international business consultant aspect of my life is generally speaking assisting new companies establishing themselves in a different marketplace.
awesome. Thank you. So again, guys, we're talking with Al Zucaro, attorney at law. His website's at the bottom, alzucaro.com. You can also give him a call. His number will also be at the bottom. And you can also send him an email, which the email will also be at the bottom of your screen shortly. Al, tell me a little. You touched on coming to Palm Beach County, but what was the deciding factor that made you, come to Palm Beach County to do your attorney business?
Well, I was involved with, it was basically a personal reason. I had some friends that introduced me to South Florida.
Hmm.
As I said, it was a change of life period. You know, there are moments in your life when everything changes. Well,
Right.
I came to one of those moments in my life back in the late 1970s, early 1980s, when I decided to go back to college. And then once I graduated college, decided to become a lawyer. The question was, do I want to stay in New York or do I want to go somewhere else?
Hmm.
And I just chose to decide to go somewhere else. And sort of one day, I mean, I don't want to be cavalier about this, but one day got in my car and drove down I-95 and stopped in West Palm Beach and said, I like this place.
It's
And
not as cold.
that's where I established myself. Went to Nova, as I said, which the law school at that time was in downtown Fort Lauderdale.
Yeah.
Graduated Nova, took the bar in 1986, and was admitted to the Florida bar in late 1986. I think it was October or November of '86, and and I never turned around and never went back. I just stayed here, and this is where my life is. So what is it? 30? It's almost it's 35 years now that I'm here.
That's awesome. What other businesses have you been involved in developing in the international market, and how does that work?
Well, as I said, I own the license to the intellectual property of a thing called World Trade Center Palm Beach. That is currently somewhat inactive, although I am getting ready to reestablish it in the marketplace. But
Hmm.
what that has done for me is it's allowed me to have connectivity all around the world, as I already said. I also, back in 2008, with a partner, started a company called Palm Beach Regional Center, which is
Wow.
a company that focuses on the the jumbo visas where people can invest 500,000 or 1 million, and actually those prices are now higher. But back then, it was 500,000 or $1 million investment, and through that investment, acquire permanent residency for the investor's spouse, and all children under the age of 21.
Wow.
That business was the first of its kind in the state of Florida, and till this day is still operating. Although it has the industry has changed dramatically, and it's a lot more difficult to traverse the EB5 world now than it was then. So, again, the connectivity has allowed me to become very international in my scope.
Yeah. We're talking a lot about this day and age where now we're all like working, remotely, working online. What other, like, do you work in any locations other than your office beside, like, what do you do like that?
Well, about a year and a half ago, my wife and I decided to bring all of our businesses into our home.
Oh, okay.
So I'm operating here. I'm talking to you now from my office in our home here in Boca Raton.
Oh, wow.
That's where I operate from.
So that's kind of like
That's the
so
center. It's the hub.
yeah. So that's
Okay.
when they all told us to stay home and work from home, you're already used to it. You're like, nah, I got this. I've been doing this for a
I've
year.
been doing that for a year and a half. This quarantine hasn't really changed life too much for Yvonne and I, because we are comfortable in our home. But to your point, I have relationships around the world. So if I'm traveling to most any country that has a World Trade Center,
Hmm.
I have the ability to knock on their door, and they will provide me with resources necessary to do whatever it is that I'm doing in that location.
Hmm.
I have traveled to many different locations that have World Trade Centers, and in the last decade or so have done a considerable amount of international travel. But now my focus and my hub is here in Boca Raton, and that's probably where I will be even as the future unfolds.
Hmm. So we're talking about business. We're talking about immigration law. Has there been in your entire career? Has there been like a case or something that's happened with that you were working on that was it left a mark in what you do, and it kind of gave you that, like, oh yeah, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing kind of mentality.
Well, that's interesting. One of the reasons that I'm doing more consultant work than law work now is I don't have the fire in my belly anymore to be that aggressive lawyer that goes out and fights the good fight.
Hmm.
But there have been some cases that stand out in my mind. I'll talk about one that had to do with a Haitian refugee. He was actually a performer in Haiti and was persecuted for his political performances. He would sing and talk about. This was back in the day of Baby Doc Duvalier, before he abandoned Haiti and went to Paris and lived on all of the dollars that he stole from the Haitian treasury.
Hmm.
That young man represented to me a fight where we finally got him his permanent residency in the United States based upon political asylum. I was very active in the world of political asylum back in those days. I even represented a gentleman who was the who was um, uh, um, whose family were U.S. citizens, but he was from Germany during World War II,
Oh
and
wow.
he was charged with being a Nazi
Wow.
when actually when the facts of the case were uncovered, he was conscripted into the German army when his country of Latvia was taken over by the Germans.
Wow.
But his role was basically that of a tailor for the German officers and for their mistresses. And he did that at one of the feeder camps, if I remember correctly, for what was going on. At any rate, I was asked by his U.S. citizen children and grandchildren to represent him when the government moved to deport him based upon a version of the facts that I just gave you.
Hmm.
And that was a very interesting case. I actually wanted to fight that case and take it to trial, but the family decided to negotiate a exit strategy and take the negotiated settlement that the government offered,
Wow.
and he left the country. That was a second case that stands out remarkably in my mind.
That
Um, I could probably go on and on. One
Wow,
of the most,
that's remarkable.
I'll tell you one rewarding experience. Not too long ago, a couple of years ago, I was in Publix shopping, and some man, a Haitian, came up to me and started a conversation with me, and I had no idea who I was talking to, but turns out that he was one of my clients from back in the 1980s, and I was able to get him his permanent residency. He's
Oh,
now
wow.
a citizen. He's married. He has two children and a home, and is the he's living the American dream.
Yeah, for sure. That's awesome. Again, we're talking to Al Zucaro about his immigration job, his about his business consulting career. If you guys want to get a hold of Al, his website is alzucaro.com. His phone number is 561-644-1665. And you can also reach out to him via email, which is al@alzucaro.com. Al, if you could give some younger, some young kids that are either not going to college yet or don't know if they should be going to college right now, or they don't know what they're doing with their lives and they just graduated from high school. What would be some of those, like, what would be something you would tell these kids?
Well, I used to, at one point in time when I was more involved with politics than I am now, I was asked to give to come and speak to juniors and seniors in high school and to give them some direction and respond to their questions. And what I found mostly was once I was introduced as a lawyer, their interest was in being a lawyer, but for, in my opinion, all the wrong reasons. Their
Mm,
perception was that lawyers make a lot of money. And that
yeah.
is, in some cases, lawyers make an excessive amount of money. And in other cases, lawyers make a living and they work hard and they put a lot of hours in, et cetera, et cetera. But my conversation to them was if they chose to go to college, my recommendation was not to enter with the idea of becoming a lawyer, but to, in your first 2 years of college, concentrate in two areas only. And
Hmm.
those are the areas of history and the humanities. And the
Wow.
reason that I was counseling or advising them to do that was if you understand history, you have a better opportunity to predict the future. And if you study history, you know what people were doing at a certain point in time.
Hmm.
If you overlay that with the humanities, the great philosophers of the past, those people that formulated thoughts that lead us to the point where our thinking is today, you begin to see how the people were thinking and what they were doing. And it gives you a greater perspective to decide what it is that you want to do. And it teaches you how to think. I can teach you to be a lawyer. I can teach you to be a doctor. I can teach you to be a accountant. There's no profession that can't be taught.
Right.
But what can't be, what needs to be groomed is the ability to think. critical thinking is an incredible skill that many people don't hone in on and don't practice. And it takes a considerable amount of practice to be able to formulate in the form of a cogent sentence and a cogent paragraph the thought that's in your head. Being able to communicate what's in your head to the community so that they can hear what they can understand what you're trying to say
Yeah.
takes critical thinking, and that's why history and the humanities is important. In fact, even till this day, I'm involved. Of course, I'm married to Yvonne, but Yvonne is now the chairwoman of the National Endowment for the Humanities Trust in Washington, D.C., and humanities is a major focus of our lives.
Wow, that's awesome. That's some great advice. We've been getting a lot of advice from the people that I've been interviewing. That was really good. I like the idea that it's hard. Like you have to learn to speak for yourself, and you can't just be one of those followers that just goes to school because they want to be XYZ, and then they do that, but then they aren't their own person. That's very good. Al, thank you so much for coming on and chatting with us about your business today. Again, guys, if you guys want to get a hold of Al, his phone number is 561-644-1665. You can reach him by email as well. His email is al@alzucaro.com, or you can go to his website, alzucaro.com. Al, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Of course.
You guys are doing a great job with the Tribune. Keep it up.
Thank you so much. Thank you. All right, guys. And now just don't forget to follow us on social media. We are live on YouTube, we're on Facebook. Make sure you follow us on Twitter as well and on Instagram. All of those usernames are Boca Tribune. And thank you so much for another great guest and a great episode. We'll be back next week. Thank you and have a great weekend.